The KeraMed EndoInjector is designed to atraumatically deliver an 8 to 9 mm endothelial graft through a 3.2 mm clear corneal incision. The device has European CE mark approval. US FDA clearance is pending. The EndoInjector is a single-use sterile device for delivery of an endothelial graft which consists of an injector cartridge, an injector body, and a foam tip plunger. Here the injector is shown in the proper position for injection. The cartridge bevel is down and the wings of the cartridge are also pointing down. The graft is advanced by moving the thumb rest forward. Here we see a diagram of the cartridge in its open position. There is a central ridge inside the cartridge lumen which guides the graft to form a double coil as the graft is advanced. This central ridge also prevents graft rotation during injection. The graft is loaded into the cartridge by pulling the graft onto the dry loading area endothelial side up with 0.12 forceps. The wings of the cartridge are used to close the cartridge after loading. The diagram on the left shows the position of the graft after it is loaded inside of the cartridge. The middle diagram shows that the central ridge inside the cartridge guides the graft to form a double coil with only stroma-to-stromal touch as the graft is advanced using fluid propulsion. The diagram on the right shows that the graft is in a double coil configuration immediately before ejection. Note that there is no endothelial touch during this process. Here we see the injector cartridge loaded into the injector body. For a right-handed surgeon, the wings of the cartridge will be turned to the right. For a left-handed surgeon, to the left. Here the injector is shown being held in the correct position. Note that the thumb is on the thumb rest and that the cartridge tip is pointing bevel down. The first step to use the EndoInjector is to soak the pre-cut donor cornea in balanced salt solution for a period between 10 and 20 minutes prior to trephination. The foam tip of the injector is expanded by soaking in the balanced salt solution for at least 2 minutes prior to the loading of the injector cartridge. The DSET graft is gently pulled onto the dry cartridge using 0.12 forceps. The cartridge is then closed and the back of the cartridge inspected underneath the surgical microscope. The graft should be symmetric, with no space visible between the graft and the cartridge. Fluid or air between the graft and cartridge can interfere with proper curling. Helon is the preferred viscoelastic to use with the EndoInjector. Helon is used to coat the entire endothelium. Helon is then used to plug the back end of the cartridge. Helon is then also used to plug the front end of the cartridge. Balanced salt solution is then used to fill the remaining spaces in the cartridge to create a fluid chamber. The wings of the cartridge are then closed. Additional Helon is then used to ensure that the back end of the cartridge is completely filled with viscoelastic. The cartridge is then loaded horizontally onto the injector body and over the hydrated foam tip plunger. For a right-hand surgeon, the wings of the cartridge are turned to the right. For a left-handed surgeon, to the left. The graft is then gently advanced by using pressure on the thumb rest. Note that the graft is advanced forward until it reaches the end of the cartridge. It is in this position that it will be brought onto the operative field. To better visualize the injection process of the EndoInjector, a DMAEK graft was stained with trypan blue and loaded onto the EndoInjector cartridge. Note that as the graft is advanced, there is no compression of the graft and no rotation. Please also note that the foam tip plunger does not touch the graft. The DMAEK graft is very thin and consists only of endothelium and decimase membrane in the middle. Note that there is no rotation or compression of this very thin graft and that there's a space between the plunger and the graft. In this still photo taken from the previous video, you can clearly see the space between the foam tip plunger and the graft. A bimanual irrigating cannula is used to inflate the anterior chamber and to provide countertraction during insertion of the tip of the EndoInjector. Note that the tip of the injector is inserted bevel down. Only the tip of the cartridge needs to be in the anterior chamber. Note that as the graft is advanced, there is no graft rotation, which assures that the graft will be delivered endothelial side down. The graft spontaneously opens. Note that the foam tip plunger is not advanced into the anterior chamber. Optionally, a single tenonylon suture is used to close the clear corneal wound. An air bubble is then injected and the graft centered. The remainder of the desec surgery is then performed as usual. Benefits of the EndoInjector include the ability to insert an 8 to 9 mm graft through an incision as small as 3.2 mm. The device allows for one-handed insertion of an endothelial graft without the use of cumbersome additional forceps and also helps to simplify endothelial transplantation. Endothelial cell loss in DSEC with use of the EndoInjector is 14% and stabilizes at 1 month. This 14% endothelial cell loss compares favorably against the 34% cell loss reported with forceps delivery of DSEC grafts. To learn more about KeraMed products or to find a distributor in your country, please visit us at KeraMed.com.